Welcome to the Adoptee Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Melissa Guida-Richards, an author, adoptee, and mom. Each week, we will delve into the nuances of adoption, as well as tips for how to bring up difficult discussions in your adoptive family. And most importantly, we will not shy away from tough topics. So thanks for joining me today, and let's jump into your weekly dose of Adoptee Thoughts. Can you please introduce yourself?
So my name is Aliyah Santos, and I am 35 years old. I am a single mother of 4 children, and I am living currently in Morocco.
Where were you adopted?
Yeah, so I'm a domestic infant adoptee. I was born in Texas, and I was adopted so I was in foster care for, 6 weeks or so. I don't know where I was during all that time, and then I was taken to Wisconsin, in the United States, and I grew up in Wisconsin.
Was it a private adoption or?
It was through an agency.
Okay.
I don't know I don't know the details of the adoption. I just know it was through an agency, and I was brought on a plane and given to this adoptive parent, and that was it.
Are your adoptive parents both white?
So I was adopted by a single mother.
Okay.
She was older when she adopted me. She was like 45 or something like that when she adopted me. And she's older now. She lived with her grandma her mom her whole life. So I grew up with my grandma, my adoptive grandma, and my adoptive mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what race are you?
I'm mixed. I'm black, white, and Mexican. So my father his father was from Mexico City, and my grandmother on my father's side is black, and then my mother and her family are white, my biological parents.
Did your mom raise you with any cultural understanding? Did she include discussions of race when you were growing up?
No, she didn't. So actually, so I would say that my adoptive mother was abusive. Okay, like first and foremost, she was an abusive narcissist. But then on top of that, to add the racial issues, I grew up in a super white community. I went to Lutheran grade school, and I was the only child of color in my school. I was the only girl in my class, so it was like super confusing. The first time that I was called a racial slur was when I was in like 3rd grade, and I didn't even know I didn't know what it meant. And then like the teacher said, oh, you can't say that word, blah, 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 blah. And then I went, I kind of I don't even know how I figured out what it was, because she didn't really talk about it. She was like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, it's not a big deal. But the kids in my class, they used to go on and on about oh, you're a Twinkie because you're, white on the inside, or you're an Oreo because you have white filling, or this kind of stuff, even at, from a young age. And then when I got to high school, it was worse because, kids were outright you eat chicken and watermelon and this and cornbread. That's what you eat all the time. That's why you're so big, because I'm a bigger woman. So they, I've been like that since high school. So they're like, that's why you're so big, because that's how you eat is fried chicken. Oh, it was bad, in this Lutheran Christian school.
Yeah.
And anytime I would ever bring up racial issues or maybe that's discrimination, it was never, oh, you need to turn the other cheek. They're just bullies. You don't have to pay attention to them. And my adoptive parent was really, she went on missions trips to Africa when she was younger. So I really believe that she got this, this saviorism in her head. She had gone to Africa, she had helped out with all these poor kids, and she was going to come home to the United States and do the same. She was going to take a poor black kid out of their, and we didn't know growing up that I was part Mexican also, but she was going to take this kid, and adopt them and help them and raise them and make them into this better person. And when I started demonstrating my own personality, she was not with it.
That mentality of giving you a better life that adoption is often portrayed in the media and everything.
Right. And I would say she maybe, well, I don't know that she sees herself as colorblind. So, with all the goings on with the the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests, it's been silence. And I really don't speak to her much anymore. Like I kind of cut her off about 5 years ago. But we have been in like very loose contact recently, just after I had my baby. And when I said like, oh yeah, there's like, there's so much going on in the United States, it's kind of heavy, like seeing like, and I can't participate in protests because I'm not there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just heavy seeing all this going on there. She was real like, oh, well, this happens all the time, like just real dismissive. And clearly has nothing, like there's no understanding or recognition of that I was a child of color being raised in this whitewashed area, and that there could be something that might need to be discussed or should be looked at or should have been thought about.
How did you originally learn that you were adopted? Did she tell you when you were a younger baby?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know when is the first time that she would have told me that I was adopted, but obviously, we're not the same color. So I'm sure that it came up through that,
Yeah.
like that we are, that she wanted to give me love or whatever whatever she had told me. I don't remember anything about like talking about adoption or anything until I was like 8 years old, and I told her I wanted to go live with my real mom because, as she was abusive, and I didn't know, I didn't have the words to say that at that time, but that was like when we first maybe started talking about adoption, or I remember the adoption entering the sphere of my consciousness. Yeah.
I'm really sorry that your experience was like that.
Yeah, well, it's a common experience
Yeah.
across adoption land, as I have since found out. So I know that I'm not alone.
No,
And
definitely. My parents raised me just with a colorblind mentality, and I know like their intentions were to protect me from other people's racism, but they didn't really believe that they had racist views of their own. So I had to grow up with a bunch of microaggressions and dealing with that within my own family. And so like I know you probably understand it's difficult when you're surrounded by other people who don't really look like you, who don't really share the same opinions as you, and
right.
you have to adjust to that. Is that one of the reasons why you are traveling now?
Yeah, so like 5 years ago, I went through a really rough breakup with a guy, with my daughter's father. And he like that was a super abusive relationship, like emotionally abusive.
Yeah.
And when I finally like realized like this is abuse, like this is abuse, I like it kind of like opened this whole world. So I started like searching for this stuff on Google. Like, what is this when somebody like lies to you and then tries to turn it around and makes you feel crazy because they lied, but you're the one that's crazy. And I started like figuring out about narcissism. And then I was like seeing like this is like what's going on in my own family. Like,
Yeah.
okay. And then that led to me like confronting her, like, and telling her this happened to me when I was little. Like, why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you, why weren't you there for me?
Yeah.
And her completely like denying and like putting the blame back on me. And I was like, that's not okay. Like, we're not gonna do that. So then once I kind of decided like I'm not gonna engage with you, like I was lonely. I don't have she's my adoptive parent was the sister, and then there's a brother. So I have one uncle, and that's all there is. Like my adoptive grandparents are dead. So it's just his family and her and my adopted sibling who is in an institution because of her abuse.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's no like other family there. There's no like, I'm alone. Like it's just me and my kids. So when I broke off that relationship, I was looking for like community. And what like when I started thinking about traveling, I was looking for like intentional communities, because this is a theme that has followed me throughout my whole life. Like like movies like Pocahontas. I want a tribe. I want to know where I belong. I want to feel like I'm part of something greater than me, and not, like not this family that doesn't fit me. And I've been searching for that my whole life. So I think that was really the catalyst to it, was I was finding like this intentional communities.
Can you explain for us?
Yeah. So intentional communities, like you go and live with people who are like-minded. So if you are a vegan who, wants to live off the land or whatever. You want to, whatever. You butcher your own animals and you don't interact with outside society. So they're, in some ways, they're kind of like communes, like hippie communes
Okay.
of the 60s and 70s. But you can find like all different kinds. So it's not just like that. It's, you can, there's religious ones, there's secular ones. There's one in New York that like they just all, the single moms, they live together and they trade childcare. So they're not like a true community, but they live in the same building and then they, they work together. So
I've heard about that.
So like that's like when I started traveling, that was what I was looking for, was community. And then I kind of discovered like, oh, hey, you can travel with kids. Because I had always thought that you can't. And then I just decided to go for it. Like, I want to go explore other places. Like, I want to see how it is to live in another country and how, like, is it different than here? Like, am I just in the wrong place? Like, what is going on? Because I've always just felt like, I don't belong in Wisconsin. I don't belong in rural Wisconsin, and I don't belong in like, so yeah, we just did it. We sold all our stuff and we set out to travel the world, and now here we are in Morocco, like 2 years later, and we've been in Morocco for a while now. But I think it's because I really love Morocco. There's everybody here looks like me, and it's really it's really, that has done a lot to like reduce the racial, like discrimination that I have felt in my life, and like the effects of that, just being in a place where everybody looks like you and you don't have to worry about, facing police harassment or whatever,
Yeah, having racial mirrors is very, I don't know, like calming, I
Definitely.
guess.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel, I personally feel like less othered, and it's just like nice having that connection to other people who kind of get the similar experiences that I have throughout my life.
Right.
So, where else have you traveled with your family?
We started out going to, in the United States, we were doing these things called workaways. So that's kind of like also a little bit of like community building or community seeking. A workaway is when you go and you stay with like a local family, and then you do like, you work with them. So like the first family that we ever went to, they had a farm, and we helped on the farm, and we helped in their shop. Like, it was an indigenous family. So we helped in their shop, and we learned about like their, indigenous traditions, and we, in exchange for accommodation. So everywhere that we go, and if we try to do a workaway, we are engaged with like the local culture, like a local family. So it helps like that connection piece, that like I'm searching for in this traveling. Yeah. And then we went to another workaway in Illinois, Wisconsin, where we stayed with a family, and they had like a farm, and we fed the animals and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool. Then we went to Iceland, and we just did a quick trip there because we had a layover. And then we went to France, and we stayed in France for a month, and we stayed at a local, like a campground. We helped this lady with her cleaning her campground and whatnot, and like making sure everything is ready for the new guests. That was really cool because we were kind of like, we went to like a festival in the local community, and just kind of, like in outside of the United States, like a lot of communities are more tight knit than we are in, like these small, so there was like this, it was just like this little village that we were just welcomed there, with open arms, even in France. And then after that, we went to Spain, and we stayed so originally we were going to go to Spain and do another workaway, but it got canceled because it was an intentional community, and one of the families decided that they were going to leave. So kind of the whole thing fell apart. So we went to an Airbnb in Spain, and that was the most amazing experience, because really we went to this Airbnb. Our host was like the sweetest lady. She always was like, "Oh, come with me and my friends to here. Come with me and my friends to there. Come with." We went to the park with them. We went to like art exhibitions with them. We went to the bar with them, because in Spain you can, like, the kids go to the bar, and it's really fun. They're all dancing. My youngest daughter was just in heaven there, because she's like a night owl, and she enjoys dancing. So she was just having her best time.
Yeah.
So that was a really good like community experience, And I'm actually like a super introvert, and I don't talk to people. Like, I'm really like hesitant to get involved in things. And even like on Facebook, like I really like, right now I'm struggling because I'm trying to figure out a way to make income while I'm on the road. But you kind of need to be like extroverted to do that, right? You need to like put yourself out there. So I'm like
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. But I've always been the one that's like, okay, just quiet, like don't bother me. I'm just chilling. But I think traveling has really helped to like pull me out of my shell a little bit. Because you have to,
Mhm.
like I have to talk to other people and I have to like a little bit rely on other people to help me, with 4 kids, it's not easy to travel. So you have to kind of like rely on other
Yeah.
people to help you out. Um, so that would be like if I could say something about like adoption and trauma and like traveling, like that would be like one of the benefits of travel. That kind of like pulls you out of your shell and shows
Mhm.
you that like not everybody is the same.
So you find that traveling has really kind of helped you reclaim who you are in a way?
I wouldn't say that I'm there yet, but I think that it's definitely like helped me become more free, like more who I am, like what I like and what I don't like. Because I think like growing up, I didn't really, because adoptive parents sometimes. So I don't want to like make blanket statements because I'm anti-adoption, but I know that this is not that about that. But like adoptive parents sometimes, and like even parents in general, they tell you like you need to be like this, you need to do this, or like they make assumptions about like who you are or who they want you to be, right? So like I kind of never had that opportunity
Mhm.
that teenagers are supposed to go through where you're supposed to be forming your own identity.
Yeah.
Like the whole point of the phase of teenagerness is to separate yourself from your parent, right? And to figure out who you are as a person, like what
Mhm.
you value and what you want to do with your life. I never had that because
Yeah.
I was I was rebelling. Like I was rebelling and saying like I'm not gonna be
Mhm.
who you want me to be, but I don't know like how to be who I want to be. Because I was getting in trouble. I would get in trouble for
Yeah.
what I wanted to be or who I wanted to be. So definitely, and I think it's just also maybe because I'm older, but because like I'm doing this traveling is what I've wanted to do since I was 15. So I'm definitely coming into myself. It's
Mhm.
been a slow process because there's so many like mind barriers, like you can't do that, like it's not okay for you to do that. But traveling has definitely helped, like, the freedom to be who you want to be and to experience new things and to figure out what you like for yourself. Like that's yeah, travel's great for
Mhm.
that.
Do you feel like being an adoptee has put an added pressure on you than, let's say, biological children of in other families?
I would say yes because we're told that we're supposed to be grateful from day one.
Mm.
Like every movie that we watch, everything you see about adoption in society is about, oh, adopted children are lucky. We should be grateful. Grateful that you weren't abandoned, grateful that you weren't thrown in the gutter. And I'm actually one of those adoptees who, when I have bad days, when I have bad periods of like, wow, what the fuck, like what the shoot just happened in my life. Like
Mhm.
I would rather have been aborted than adopted. Like it's not a better life. It wasn't a better life for me. Like it was a different life, yeah, for sure. But it wasn't rainbows and unicorns like everything has turned out to be. So um I think it does add a lot of extra pressure,
Mhm.
especially when it's like a parent who can't, like my adoptive parent, she never married, so she could never, and she was like super Christian, so she could never have kids of her own because she didn't have a husband. So,
Mm.
that kind of put pressure on me, like to be this, you know, carbon copy of her, and it wasn't happening. Like I'm nowhere near as like you. I'm like, and we're completely opposite.
Can you explain why you are anti-adoption?
Okay, so I would say like, and there's like a huge anti-adoption community out there, right? And I
Mhm.
don't think that anybody is actually anti-adoption. We are anti-adoption the way that it's currently practiced in American society today. You
Mhm.
know, I don't believe that there should be an exchange like $40,000 for a domestic infant adoption. Like there should be no money in adoption. I'm anti-adoption because you know, there has to be a better way than that. There has to be a better way than people like 40 parents waiting for one infant to come along. Like, that's not okay. Like even foster care, okay? So foster care obviously is it's full of inequalities. Like they're taking these black and brown kids from their families for reasons of poverty or whatever, reasons that the system has created in the first place, and now they're taking them from their culture and putting them into Caucasian families. And I'm not in agreement with that. Like, we need to fix the problems that, like the drug abuse. Like, where does that come from? How is that coming? Like, how does the system that we live in affect that?
Mm-hmm.
So I am not anti-adoption. I would say I'm anti-adoption, or anti the way that adoption is practiced in the industry today, because I don't believe that there should be money, especially not billions of dollars, pumped into this industry per year. $40,000 to me for 40 waiting parents to adopt one child, and it costs $40,000. That's insane. Like, a lot of people don't even know that that's how it is. And then just like the coercion that goes along with that practice, in as far as expectant mothers. Like, I was an expectant mother, a young expectant mother at one time, and I went to. So I got pregnant when I was 17 with my first daughter, and I knew that my adoptive parent would kick me out. Well, I didn't know. I thought for sure she would. Um, and I had went to one of these like one of these houses, like these maternity homes, for help, just to see like what my options were, because if she kicked me out, like, I needed someplace to go. And that was like one of the first things that they said to me, like, oh, well, if you give your child up for adoption, like, you won't have to worry about this anymore. Like, I didn't ask you to give up my child for adoption. I'm asking for help to parent my. So I know that the tactics that these agencies are using is predatory. So I don't believe that should be happening. I don't believe that there should be money in adoption. And I also don't believe, like, as far as foster care, I know a lot of people are hoping to adopt from foster care, okay? So you have, and I've actually worked, like, my last job before I left to travel was working as a licenser for foster care, because I wanted to help and, like, maybe change the process so that people who are being licensed are more accountable to like what they're doing. That system is completely screwed up, and from the inside of that, like, looking into that system is just wrong. For me, right now, the current practices of foster care and the removal of disproportionately Black and brown children from their families and place into white families for adoption is similar to indigenous families being torn apart because white America wanted to whitewash those children, get rid of indigenous practices, and make them conform to white society. And for me, it's the same thing that's happening now, but we're not putting those kids into um, color, families of their own color. Like, now there's protections for indigenous children, but there's not for Black and brown children, other minority children. You know, for me, when you're looking at foster care and you're seeing that a lot of these kids are removed for reasons of poverty, or reasons that are ingrained in our system of racial inequality, uh, like, you can't just say, like, foster care is good, or like, oh, if you took away foster care, these kids would have nowhere to go. That may be true, but, like, what is going on in the system that allows this to happen? Like, why are these parents drug addicts? Like, why do they not have the resources that they need to parent these children? Like, why are they really being removed? So I don't like that a lot of foster parents go into foster care knowing that they have no goal of reunification for the kid. They just want a kid, you know? It's so, like, when I was a foster care licenser, it was disturbing. Like, the number of parents that the people that outright said to me, like, I want a baby. Like, my hope is to get a baby from this. That's not the goal of foster care. The goal of foster care is to reunify the child with the parents, So I'm not okay with the way that that's practiced, and I'm not okay with the way that society views adoption. As far as, like, adoptees should be grateful. Like, biological kids have no, we weren't asked to be brought into this world. We shouldn't have to be grateful for the basic human dignity of having a place to live or having a family. Um, so I really just would not say that I'm anti-adoption. I don't agree with how it's practiced today. I think that if there's kids that need a home, and it, like, really truly the parent doesn't want them, um the parent absolutely has been given every choice in the world to stop abusing them, and I don't even believe that kids should be necessarily removed for drugs if it's not a safety issue. And if it is a safety issue, there are many ways that can be worked around to help that parent to get stable and the kids to be okay in that house. Um and I kind of just lost my train of thought, but states are beginning to recognize this, that kids are often better off in their families than they are being removed, even if there are safety issues. The state of Wisconsin, when I was working for the foster care agency, they're putting money into these programs to help kids stay in home care, and then have like somebody come and check on them, because they're saying that it's not okay, that it is traumatic for a kid to be separated.
Can you explain more about what your job entailed in the foster care system?
Yes. So I was a licenser. So I went out, a family would call us up and say, "Hey, I'm interested in being a foster parent. Can I get licensed?" So we have to license these parents, right? And I would go to the house, and I would go and talk to them about like their goal, like what their family's like, what their income is like, what their children are like, what their house is like, all that kind of stuff, to determine if they were to be an okay foster parent. So we had to do 3 different interviews. We had to first like go and talk to them about all the requirements that entails to be a foster parent, like what their house needs to look like. They need to do fingerprints. We need to send them off. They have to get all these criminal background checks, whatnot. And the second one was like an interview between the husband and the wife, or if it was just a single parent, or a single person, just the person, about like their family background. So like, did they grow up with abuse? They had to fill out these questionnaires, and we would mark like where we were supposed to, what questions we wanted to ask them to know further information. Um, so if they had like a red flag, we'd ask them more about that question, right? And then also, then the third interview was more about family life, and that was another questionnaire that they had to fill out, and we interviewed them together to see if there was any like lies being told or any like discrepancies between their information. So I just wanted to tell you though that when we're doing these interviews, right? The interview is all about trying to make sure that these parents are okay people to be foster parents. But at the end of the day, none of that mattered, because if you knew a current foster parent that was like that was a good foster parent and took a lot of kids in, you were probably getting through, even if you weren't a good fit, even if you did have some issues in your background. Um, there was one time I had made a recommendation like that this person, and I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was that was wrong with these people. But I said like, these people are not like, I have a bad feeling about them. And it turned out like they were not good people, but they almost got through the licensing process because they knew another foster parent. So foster care, like the licensing, is a lot of politics about who do you know, and they don't turn down people because of red flags. Sometimes they can have a lot of red flags, but it's more about income, like how much you have a lot of income, and at least in the agency that I worked at, and I'm sure it's different everywhere, but they're so desperate for foster parents that a lot of people are just slipping through the cracks.
In the process, were there questions about cultural awareness? Because like you mentioned, there's a lot of Black and brown babies in the system. So, and I know there's laws in place that you can't discriminate against a couple because of their race. And so, which is one of the reasons why white parents tend to be 70% and above, like the amount of people adopting and fostering. But when you had white parents looking to foster and then adopt a child of color, was there any process to ensure that they were culturally aware, or would be able to be in a transracial family without any issues?
So there was nothing really in the interview process, like when they're getting licensed, about being culturally aware. After part of becoming a foster parent, they needed to take, I think it was like 12 or something classes for an hour each, to be licensed. In order to finish the licensing process, they need to take these classes, and one of the classes was about cultural awareness. Okay, so in the very last like 2 weeks before I was leaving this job, I was asked to do and I had only been there for a year, so I hadn't taken the training on how to train the foster parents until like the end. So my last 2 weeks, I was asked to lead this class about cultural awareness, racism, and bias in foster care and whatnot. So first of all, I was like, I had already gotten into a little bit, I wouldn't say trouble, but I had gotten in trouble because of my views of, foster care is towards unification, not for adoption. Like, I'm not I'm not going to sugarcoat this fact that like adoption can be traumatic, or like being separated from your parents can be traumatic. Like I told the people I was working with that, and some people, they didn't like that. So I kind of had gotten into a little bit of,
Okay.
so I was not trying to like stir the waters at that point. I was just trying to get through my 2 weeks and like, finish it off. But the training that I led and the foster parents that I dealt with, like I was talking about, have you ever experienced white privilege, or have you ever been privileged enough to not have to deal with this? Have you ever been privileged enough to not have to deal with this situation? And a lot of them said, well, but if I was in a different city, my answers wouldn't be the same. It might be like that here, but it's not. Racial discrimination doesn't exist. Like there was only one parent in that training of 10 parents that actually listened and was okay with hearing about racial discrimination and whatnot. The other foster parents in that class, they were basically shut me down. And like if I try to tell them like, okay, you have a child in your house that's a child of color, like they're gonna have to deal with this at some point. Like you need to know about these things. You can't tell me that it doesn't exist. Oh wow, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, just so dismissive. And these are the people that are put in charge of watching our Black and brown kids. Like in what world is that okay? And then we have all these transracial adoptees that don't have any idea, how to manage life once they get out into the world, out of their parents, white protection to help them. So that's really the point of that. And if I continue with the anti-adoption theme, like I said, just not being anti-adoption, but not for the way that it's practiced, I would like to see there be much more strict like checks put on adoptive parents as far as like psychological background, because I know that there's, just talking to people in adoption land, like other adoptees, there's a lot of adoptive parents that have the same issues that my adoptive parent had. Like, why are we not doing psychological screenings on these people? Like in-depth psychological screenings, not just one time, not just 2 times, but like continuous. And like after the child is placed, it should be continuous, not just not just a little pick at the surface. It needs to be in depth. And I think that if people are going to be, people shouldn't be paying money. If there's kids that need adoption, that need an alternate family because they cannot absolutely 100% grow up in the family that they were born to, there needs to be like one giant master list of people who are interested in helping people, not necessarily adopt, but helping kids to find the families that they need. And it needs to be just one list, and you get what you get, and they have to have all the checks. I mean, obviously that's not probably realistic, but it shouldn't be money. There should not be money in taking care of children.
Yeah. At the end of it, I feel like, and I know a lot of people, and not just feelings wise, if you look at adoption, domestic, international, transracial, whatever, it's a business when it comes down to it. And there are transactions where money's exchanged, and you have to bring in lawyers and people like you who license families and stuff like that. And if you are thinking about adoption or an adoptive parent in general, I feel like a lot of people aren't educated with, like you said, the practices that are involved, the screening processes, and just like the general laws. There's no one standard. Everywhere is different. And like you said, people slip through the cracks. And so for people like you who are more anti-adoption than other people, I wouldn't say I'm anti-adoption. I'm more family preservation and adoption only if it's necessary.
Right. Well, that's why I would say I mean, if it's necessary, yes. But even the way that it's practiced, like I think that just needs to be reformed.
Exactly. And I think most people should be able to agree that reform needs to happen. So I'm glad you have come on today and we're discussing things like that, and especially having a firsthand knowledge of the lack of psychological testing, and just like you said, politics, where one family was approved and another would kind of be pushed through even though you saw some red flags. That's just, to me as an adoptee, that's scary, because you think having these things in place, like you going into homes and asking these questions, would then put a stop to these types of people who are dangerous to adopt a kid who you're supposed to be protecting in the first place.
Well, but you see, it's really focused on financial. Like, so even when I went into that agency trying to find, like, I want to find more Black and brown families to be foster parents, right? But like minority families, a lot of them are living in, smaller homes or intergenerational homes where there's, like the mother and the father and the grandparents are living in the home and the children, okay? So foster care rules say that you need to have a certain amount of bedrooms and the bedrooms need to have a certain amount of space and whatnot. So that's not feasible. These rules are written by white people with homes that are, they have the capacity to fit multiple kids in their specific standards. But then that's ruling out this whole class of people who can help and could be foster parents and need to be foster parents, but they just don't match these arbitrary rules that someone who has no knowledge of minority communities has come up with. So that really also disturbs me because I, a lot of times, I'm sure you've heard in adoption land that black and brown families, they don't adopt kids. That's why white parents need to adopt kids, right? But that's not really true because black and brown families, they are taking care of kids. And that was even a thing with, so, kinship cases, is the family that's taking care of the kid that has been removed from their other family member, right?
Yeah, biological family
So
members.
even though, right. So relatives. But even in those cases, it was really like they're family, but they're really hard to get licensed because they don't often, typically, the family of the black and brown kids don't meet the standards that the foster care licensing has in place,
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's that rule, they need to think about the fact. And this is what really bothers me also. Like I had just posted about this in the transracial adoption group that I think I've seen you posting, and also I don't know if it's that one or the other one. But do parents even realize like the depth of the industry that they've benefited from? Like it's fine for them to be in like these transracial adoption groups to like learn about the process after they've already adopted. But do they even realize like the depth of the thing that they've participated in? Like how far that goes, like racially and whatnot,
I don't
to
think so.
how the children were removed. It's crazy.
Yeah, because even we as transracial adoptees, like I feel like we understand a bit more than adoptive parents just in general, but we have a tendency to learn more about the system that placed us and was part of like our family structures. But I don't feel like adoptive parents go into adoption looking for more information other than the basics that get them approved. Because like I see it, I'm in some adoptive parent groups, and not because I'm looking to adopt, but because I'm trying to understand what adoptive parents kind of like think and what their process of it. And I'm writing a book on transracial adoption called The White Savior Mentality for North Atlantic Books. And one of the things I see time and time again is like, which process is faster? How can I get approved sooner? And you have all these people looking to just speed it through so they can get this baby, this child into their home, but they're missing all these other steps that should happen to kind of educate themselves and prepare themselves for what is involved in adoption. And like you mentioned, like a lot of children who are adopted deal with trauma, and you have these adoptive parents who are then dealing with children acting out, and adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, and all these other issues that weren't addressed in the beginning of the process. And that's a big issue, and another issue why like adoptees can be abused at some astronomical rates that nobody in adoption land, like you put it, like to talk about.
Right. I just think it's funny because even at this, when I was in this job, we went to this training about, adoption and foster care and whatnot. And the state level, the state of Wisconsin level trainer was saying to us, like, foster parents often assume that there's going to be no trauma if they adopt a baby. And we know that that's not true. Okay, so if you all know that, like, why is this not public knowledge? Like, foster parents need to know that. Adoptive parents need to know that. Just because a child is a baby does not mean that there's not going to be some trauma involved. We know that. The state knows that. Government agencies know that. So why is that not talked about? Why is the only narrative that we have in society that adoption is so good? Like, I just don't, we need to change that. I don't know how we can change that. And because people, as soon as you mention like adoption might not be this like amazing thing, they shut down.
Oh, they don't just shut down, they attack too. They go on the defensive and they attack. I write about my adoption and HuffPo and Zora and like all these other websites, and I get some
Mhm.
really angry emails from adoptive
Yes.
parents who are,
I've seen comments.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
there's these adoptive parents or even just strangers who don't have any personal aspect in adoption community. They just feel defensive of adoptive parents in general and will attack, saying like you should be grateful, and then if you don't like it, leave.
Mhm.
So, and
Right.
like that mentality is so detrimental, and like it's bad for adoptees and just
It is.
adoptive families in general. If you want an adoptive family to flourish, there needs to be more understanding and open discussions like this, to because in order to make changes and to improve the system, we have to talk about the faults in them.
Right. Right. Well, I think a lot of them will never care because they got what they wanted. I mean, they're
Mm,
getting what they wanted, right? So why they have no incentive to change. That's why I say in this, even in this group, like they've already profited from the transracial adoption. So do they really care about what us adoptees are putting into that group? Like when
yeah.
I meant, a lot of them are still pushing back and saying like you're wrong, you're hateful, you're bitter. Like we're not hateful or bitter. We're trying to get you to see the realities of the situation. Like the
Yeah.
reality is you have profited, you have gotten what you wanted on the back of a minority oppressed group.
Hmm.
Like there's no escaping that. And is it okay? No, it's not okay. I was just talking to one of them because she had gotten like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't mean to hurt your feelings." Like, you don't need to be sorry. You just need to
Hmm.
listen. Like, just listen. We're not asking for you to feel bad or to take on all the blame for this system that you participated in, but listen and do better. Like, help us change it. Come be on our side, be our ally. We don't ask for much. Like, it's not,
Hmm.
oh, girl, it's crazy.
I get what you mean, and it's just even just talking to my parents about things, and I know you mentioned like trying to discuss like George Floyd and all those things. I mentioned Black Lives Matter to my father, and we had an absolutely gigantic blowout argument, and I was like about to leave and like not talk to them ever again.
Oh,
It got that bad just because like my dad's a diehard Trump
yeah.
fan, and he just like does not understand at all.
Oh,
But
Lord.
like luckily, like my mom was more open to conversation, and we were able to kind of to get through. So like I feel like it's important for adoptive parents to realize that by opening discussions about race and the flaws in the system with systemic racism and everything, we're not asking our adoptive parents to, like you said, to take on all that responsibility and apologize every single day or whatever and like say they're sorry. We just want to have people learn more and improve the system. So we're helping families and not just plucking all these children out and just like whitewashing the entire situation as like this is a perfect solution, because it's not. And in the media, like you said, all the time we see like the Gerber baby,
Definitely.
like, oh, this family, they adopted this child. And I think recently this family adopted like five siblings, and they were all black kids from the foster system, and then the
Mm.
media just portrayed it as like look at all look at what this family's doing, this white family, look, they kept the kids together, and it's just like that straight positive angle without any discussions of like why were those children
Mhm.
put in this situation, like what was done to help support their family, and now you have that those children's story out for the entire world to
Right.
see without any consideration to how they're gonna feel when they're older.
That's a whole another, like, thing too, like the exploitation of the children and the Huxley
Oh, yes.
stalker
Yeah,
scandal, like,
yeah.
that was another huge thing. Yeah, but you just like, with the Gerber baby, you wonder, like, what was the reason that her parent gave her up for adoption, and would this money that the Gerber baby is receiving help support, like, if she would've got that as her. Oh, it's crazy.
Mhm.
It's crazy. It's just
Yeah.
people don't even realize it. And I think we need more like adoptee voices in entertainment. Like, like This Is Us. I know that a lot of people say that. I've never actually seen that one, but I know that a lot of adoptees say that that's more like true life to what they've experienced. But like we need to
Mhm.
have like our own movies or something so that people understand like it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, I think like what's his name? I think Colin Kaepernick. I'm probably saying
Mhm.
that wrong. He's working with Netflix to get a show up about his experience as a teenager, and he
Mhm.
has adopted parents. So I'm super excited to see that when it comes out. And just
Yeah.
like you said, representation matters, and it helps for us all in the adoption community to have realistic stories about our experiences. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, for me, just even having these conversations with other adoptees like you, it just makes me feel supported and my experience validated
Yeah.
and less alone.
Right. Well, I was 31 years old before I knew that my or my life experience was not normal. I never,
Hmm.
like, I really honestly, when I was, because this is what happened. So when I was like a young kid, like everything was not horrible. When I started to become a
Hmm.
teenager, it started to get really horrible. And I would like go out, like I would try to get away from her at all costs. So I would like be outside until, 12 o'clock or curfew. I had to come home, like whatever age I was. I would be out
Yeah.
until curfew. And I would always be accused of doing drugs or drinking or whatever the situation. Like I was out with friends and I was getting into trouble, like promiscuity wise, because I was searching for
Hmm.
love, like constantly searching for
Yeah.
love. But I was never out drinking or smoking or doing, drugs. That's
Yeah.
what I got told. You're a bad person. You're, like making me out to be like this horrible teenager. And I was 30 years old before I realized that that's the normal thing that teens do. Like
Yeah.
teenagers are supposed to like leave their parents at that, like that's their job. That's literally the job of a teenager, is to figure out who they are so that they can prepare to leave their parents' nest, right? But I never knew that until I started talking to other adoptees. So I think it's really, really super important for, adoptive parents to get adoptees involved in groups with other adoptees so that they can know
Yes.
that they're not alone and that their experience is not, unique, And I
Hmm.
think that that's happening more because now it's the age of the internet, right? So it's super,
Yeah.
super easy to find that information, but it wasn't for me. And I probably would have gone through life thinking I was like this horrible person because that's what my adoptive parent told me. And
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. I didn't have the words or even the knowledge to think about like what was wrong in that situation.
What would your advice be for younger adoptees, like teen adoptees, who are experiencing similar things to what you did when you were hitting that age?
That's a question that adoptive parents ask a lot, right? Is like, what would you wish your adoptive parents would have done differently? Well, for me, like first of all, like acknowledge that I was my own human being and that I wasn't like, you know, that I didn't have to be similar to her.
Hmm.
That would have never happened. But like just I guess learning about yourself and like learning about adoption and like being able to feel like how you feel regardless of if you're angry at your adoptive parents, if you hate adoption, if you like adoption. And it's so hard though because and I know you've probably heard about the fog, right? How adoptees are in the fog. So I
Hmm.
think like a lot of people like me, we don't have the words or we don't have like even the like, you can be ungrateful, it's okay. Like, you don't have to subscribe
Yeah.
to this certain, thinking about adoption. So I think it's really hard for young teens because they're not fully, like they don't have the knowledge or they don't have the words to describe how they're feeling, and they're still dependent on their parent. So I guess I
Yeah.
would say, like, they just need to know that it's okay to be themselves. And hopefully their
Hmm.
adoptive parents let them feel what they're feeling and don't try to like judge that or try to control how they express themselves because that's really and I think that's all in all parents, for my kids too, I have a 16-year-old daughter and she's actually she's actually a really great kid and I'm so so proud of her, but that's her job. She's mouthy and she's sassy sometimes. She doesn't do what I ask her to all the time, but her job is to figure out who she is when she's away from me, and she's so close.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
adopting, it's the same with biological kids. We just need to let our kids figure themselves out and not be too strict or controlling because eventually they're going to be adults, and that's our job is to lead them through that to adulthood.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree. And I hope more adoptive parents will learn to support their children in that venture. And
Yeah.
if your parents aren't that supportive, just know that, like you said, there's adoptee groups out there that you can find on Facebook. There's a big adoption community on Twitter. And even Instagram is taking off where you can find other adoptees who have experienced all different things. And you can find that
Hmm.
support in us. Like, you're not alone. So I hope
Yeah.
any adoptee who's listening, you find your community and know that there are other people like you.
Yes, and don't take abuse just because that's your parent.
Hmm.
Like, don't sit in abuse and let yourself go through. I knew when I was 16 years old that my adoptive parent was not okay, that there was something wrong there. but I said, oh, she's my parent. Like, I have to fix it. I have to fix it.
Yeah.
Don't let yourself sit in a situation like that for 5 more years or 10 more years just because you think that you're the one that needs to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to,
Yeah.
that would be my advice too. Like, just don't put yourself through that. Abuse is never okay, whether it's coming from a partner or a parent.
Exactly. I definitely agree. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you joined me today. And if you would like to hear more from Adoptee Thoughts, make sure to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to learn more about me, you can check out my website, adopteethoughts.com. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.